Welcome to the Angler's Wisdom Podcast,
supercharged by Amped Outdoors Lithium.
Today, anglers fish longer. Today, anglers fish harder. Today, anglers rely more than ever on their electronics. It all comes down to catching more fish, and today, anglers rely on Amped Outdoors lithium batteries, period.
catch more fish,
Learn tips, tricks,
techniques, and secrets, and decades of angler's wisdom. Welcome to the show.
Oh, yeah! Yeah! Oh!
Oh, that's a nice one.
Yeah!
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Angler's Wisdom Podcast. Today I have a special episode with you, or for you. I have Moulton Avery from the National Center of Coldwater Safety, my expert when I need to find the facts on something that I'm unsure about. And I also have Stig Larssen, the founder and CEO of Level 6, which makes a lot of protective gear to keep you safe on the water. Whether you're in a kayak, a paddleboard, a boat, even on, they might make some ice fishing stuff. I'm unsure about that, but definitely any kind of watercraft. And what we're going to do, we're just going to go through and first of all, talk about some of the rules, supposed rules that have been publicized over the years that really should not be followed because they put you in a very dangerous situation. And we'll transition into talking about the actual facts that you need to focus on and the important gear, the safety gear that's going to keep you alive out there. And we'll talk about also the difference between a quality manufacturer and say like a generic dry suit off of Alibaba. There's some major differences that you and I really probably don't even know about because we're not in the industry. We don't know the differences or understand that. So should be a great show. Hope you guys brought your questions. And what I'll do, I'm going to go ahead and bring Moulton Avery on from the National Center for Coldwater Safety and Stig Larssen, CEO and founder of Level 6. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks.
How you guys doing today?
I'm good. Yeah, really good. It's up in Canada, so it's cold up here. All the water's frozen.
Yeah, the islands are starting to lock up. I know a couple of guys are starting to pull some fish. So looks like we're going to be cold for a while. I know you're in Canada, and Moulton, you're over in Washington State, right?
Yeah, I'm in Vancouver, Washington. And the interesting thing is, have places like Lake Erie or also on the East Coast where the water temperature can get down to 32, it could freeze. That's not really the case for most of our paddling in Washington and Oregon, the Pacific Northwest. But, the flip side is that the water temperature here is cold, dangerously cold year round. So, sometimes you think, oh, well, it's the middle of the summer. Water's still cold, still dangerously cold if you don't have thermal protection.
Yeah, that's true. And there's also a lot of current situations out there that I think a lot of people might not be as familiar with. And, if you find yourself in that water and you can't get back into your kayak or out of that cold water, it's going to be basically a death sentence, especially if that current catches you and drags you out to sea. I know there was a story handful of years ago about a couple of gentlemen out in your area. Let's see if I could pull this up real quick. Anybody that hasn't seen it, I would definitely search for this title on YouTube. But it talks about these guys that were coming across the Rosario Strait here, and they were basically doing like an island journey. And what happened was one of the kayakers wasn't very truthful about his experience, and they found themselves in a very dangerous situation trying to get back. The one kayaker ended up falling behind. The other guy went to get help, and fortunately both survived. But the one that fell behind got swept out of the Rosario Strait here. I think he ended up like 4 miles in the ocean. So,
we have a fairly large tidal range here in the Pacific Northwest, and particularly out there in the San Juan Islands. Rosario Strait is notorious for having tricky currents, which can wind up opposing the wind, which really raises the level of the difficulty and the roughness of the water. So it's not a place that's forgiving if you don't have the right gear, if you haven't done your planning. It's not, I would say, crossing from one island to another across Rosario Strait is definitely not a beginner trip, and it's a quick way to get into trouble. And that incident is just one of many. I mean, we have literally hundreds of close calls and fatalities in our database that demonstrate, exactly that, how dangerous it is.
Yeah, even on Lake Erie, about I think it was 3 or 4 years ago now, we lost a gentleman not too far from me. I don't know really what happened. I know the water temperature was 48 degrees. The wind shifted 40 mile an hour out of the north, which makes our shoreline pretty nasty. And unfortunately, the gentleman didn't survive. The flip side of that, I've been spreading the kayak safety stuff for a long time. But one thing that I think we're missing the connection in is, like, the same stuff that we use for kayak safety is the same stuff that you're going to be using on a boat, especially like October, November, December, when people are out there fishing the largest walleye tournaments in the world. It's really easy to find yourself in a dangerous situation. And if you don't get out of that water in, a short amount of time, things are going to go bad. And it reminded me of, I had spoken with a guy from the U.S. Coast Guard out at the Catawba Island boat show. And that's what he mentioned. He's like, we wear Mustang dry suits anytime the water temperature is 60 degrees or below, combined with the proper materials and underlayers, so definitely want to focus on that as well, because this thing could save your life. It can extend your season, number one, or I would say number two, because number one is make it back to your family safe.
I think one thing about dry suits, we look at them at the National Center for Cold Water Safety. We look at them as survival gear. And so we take them very, very seriously. But one thing I say is, of course, you want your survival gear to be decently manufactured by somebody that really knows and is not cutting corners on it. But I also say it's not enough to simply just go out and buy a dry suit, because you really have to know, you should be intimately familiar with your survival gear. And what you don't want to have happen is for you to capsize and then realize, oh my God, I don't have enough insulation under this dry suit, or I purged it too much, burped the air out, whatever it happens to be. You want to know exactly how that gear works and at that particular water temperature. So if your water temperature is 50 degrees, what you need under that dry suit is very different from what you'd need at 60 degrees or, let's say, 40 degrees. And you mentioned 48. 48 is a fairly brutally cold temperature. At 40 degrees, the water feels like it's burning your skin. That's how physically how it feels. And So you really need to have some experience with that. And Chuck, when you and I first got together, you were like just a shining light in the darkness. You were, I mean, I looked at this and I thought, well, I'm not a fisherman, but boy, do I really need someone that can reach out to the fishing community. And I think you've done that. And one of the reasons we feature you and your buddies on our website in that video field testing is because you were out there in the water doing exactly what we think you should be doing if you're going to be, practicing cold water safety. You were capsizing your kayaks, practicing re-entries, and it was, that video has been seen thousands and thousands of times. And so I think that together, we're helping to promote cold water safety, and we'd still be paddling in wetsuits, which are not nearly as comfortable, if it wasn't for people like Stig, who said, oh, I want to go in here and I want to make a first class product that's a dry suit, and I'm going to be absolutely religious about making sure that it's well constructed and that the materials are top quality, so that if you capsize and you're in that desperate situation, the difference between having one of these dry suits on and not is it's a difference between a desperate race against time, and one where you're not as desperate and you're basically still warm and you're functioning and you can effectively do that rescue. And that's why this thermal protection is such an incredible game changer in terms of safety.
Yeah, it allows you to go out and have adventures like this. It was a cold day. The fishing wasn't the best, but this is Justin Atkinson's. He was coming out to get some cold water experience and test his dry suit and stuff. But at the end of the day, you get that gear, and not only does it extend your season, but it brings you back when, not if, but when shit hits the fan, because it is inevitable. And one thing, talking about Stig, one thing that completely impressed me, I came across your video, that one that I popped up on the screen here. And anybody listening, if you haven't seen it, definitely search for this title, or check out the Level 6 YouTube channel and watch this video. Because what Stig does is he breaks down the differences between, your quality manufacturers, and not specifically just Level 6. He is, founder and CEO of Level 6, and they're a great company, but across the board, it's just a great unbiased video that educates you on, what really makes $1,000 dry suit versus $150 Alibaba dry suit, and if you want, you can kind of describe some of that stuff for us.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's one, even to this day, like we have a full in-house repair facility at our warehouse, and we still get back people who have purchased a suit from Amazon or Alibaba direct, and they send it to us, and it could be a Level 6 ripoff or a Kokatat ripoff or an NRS ripoff, and we get them back, and right away you can tell that it's not one of those brands. It's been copied. They've used the fabric that they found off the shelf. I think what people don't understand is, like, $1,000 dry suit, it seems like an incredible investment. But the fact of the matter is, once you start getting those components and putting them together, like the waterproof zippers that are made in the UK or Germany, the gaskets are made in the UK. There's 30 yards of very expensive seam tape just to create one dry suit, plus pressure testing them. That's a 15 to 20 minute ordeal for every suit that we send out, not including the drying time before it gets repackaged out. So there, all of those costs involved. It's just it's impossible to create something for $300 or $400 and assume it's the same quality. I think we've kind of conditioned ourselves with Shein and Temu and this FBA, Amazon stuff, that there's always a better price for something. When in fair enough, there's always a better price for something, but you're sacrificing something on the other side, and it turns into quality, especially in things when you're relying on safety equipment. Because like you said, it's not a matter of it's about buying you time. Good safety equipment buys you time to kind of rectify where you are, and that's across all sports. Speaking of just in paddle sports, with a dry suit with good thermal laying underneath, it's going to buy you time to get out of that situation, so you can get back in your boat, you can get to a safe place, and then like you say, return back to your home. So I mean, the efforts that go into one of our suits, the component list, it's insane. And then even just the fabric development, when I broke apart that suit that we purchased from Amazon, as it was a ripoff of one of our top suits, the Emperor, which I've worked on for 20 years. That suit's been modified and in production. But even before that, 4 or 5 years before that, we started working on just simply the fabric that could create a waterproof, breathable garment of that caliber. And over my lifetime of running level 6, it's been 27 years. That fabric's being improved, and new techniques come out, new types of membranes, new types of lamination techniques, and even just recently, us going PFAS free in all of our products. That was, we were the first paddling gear company in the world to launch a PFAS free garment in general, let alone the PFAS-free dry suit. So that just kind of shows you that all of that innovation and research and development that goes into something, there is a cost to that, but in the end, you're getting something that will or could potentially save your life.
Yeah, the PFAS-free thing is very interesting to me. I've done a little bit of research on the effects of PFAS, and that kind of led me down a rabbit hole where I started to understand that the stuff from Shein and Temu and like AliExpress and stuff like that, the chemicals they're using are not regulated whatsoever.
That's right.
So they could be using stuff. I mean, who knows? You don't even know who's making this. So you want to be careful with that stuff. At the end of the day, more chemicals into your body, it could create some very dangerous health situations long term, aside from the quality aspect.
Yeah, also the conditions that these places the garments are being made in, it's not what we want to support, as the Western world. We want to support, fair trade, equal opportunity for everybody. And that, generally, I would say most brands in North America, especially in our space, the water sports space, they abide by those rules, and they audit their factories, and they audit their suppliers, and they make sure that everything checks all the right boxes.
Yep. Moulton, did you want to say something?
Yeah, well, I just think one of the things that Stig said really resonates with me, and that's he said that the gear buys you time. And what I mean when I say the gear buys you time is you capsize, you get back in the boat eventually. What's that experience been like? Has it been absolutely horrific, and it's something you're going to have nightmares about for months? And once you get back in the kayak, your hands are so numb you can barely hold the paddle, and you're shivering, and you're all shook up. And now you're still in the same conditions that you capsized in to begin with. Now you're supposed to continue paddling. And the difference when you're wearing good survival gear, like the type that Stig's making, is that you get back in the kayak and it's no big deal. You're not shivering, you're not shook up, you're not half frozen. And in short order, you can begin to paddle again on your extended course. And if you capsize a second time, okay, here's another rescue. But that's the difference. And it's a very, very practical one, and it's related to survival and performance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think even speaking on that point, there's a lot of conversations about, a lot of the cheap gear, from boats to paddles to equipment to life jackets you can purchase on a lot of the Amazon sites, and even factory direct from Asia, they'll ship it to you. The problem with some of that stuff is that what you said there, it creates a negative experience if things don't go 100% perfectly. And then you start losing enthusiasts and participants in the sport that, brings a lot of positive to people in the world. So it's, even as, outfitters and retailers, we really try to encourage everyone across the whole chain that has the ability to touch, introduce people to paddle sports or water sports in general, to recommend high quality, reputable gear that is going to be there for them when they need it the most, and give them that best experience possible when they're on the water.
Yeah, 100%. I just want to drop.
There's always that, the Home Depot boat you see in the front of the store. It's just it's a bit of a love-hate with that. In one sense, it gets people introduced to the sport at maybe a price point that they can get into. But, if those people take that boat and they're expecting to have a similar experience as you would in, a $2,000, North Sea kayak, it's just not going to be the same. It might be the same when everything is perfect in your backyard, but once you get into conditions where it's not perfect, that's where all that research and development and investment in the materials to create that solid product is where it pays off.
100%.
You get onto that little duck pond and the water is warm. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But these big box store boats don't have the same safety features. Most of them lack flotation. So if the kayak capsizes or a wave comes over, dumps a lot of water in the cockpit, it's going to swamp. You're not going to be able, or you're going to have a terribly difficult time trying to rescue it. They don't have deck lines. They put this lip around the cockpit that makes it look like you could attach a spray skirt, but really it's just cosmetic. So these are not kayaks that anyone considers, any responsible or experienced paddler considers to be a good choice for a situation where you might capsize or get into difficulty. And yeah, I agree, Stig. It's nice to see people getting out on the water, and I don't disrespect them for that, because I think they're out on the water for the same reasons that we are.
Yeah.
But they're uninformed they're new paddlers. They're uninformed about the danger. They're uninformed about rescues. They've never tried to get back in a kayak that's capsized. And so they don't really know. And this is the reason I think that all three of us are really positive about education and the difference that education can make in the paddling community. And we have a long history of educating one another in paddle sports. But I think some of that's gotten lost with the increased popularity when you can buy a cheap big box type kayak from a manufacturer that really is in it just to churn the product and has they're not concerned with safety at all. They just want to move 100%. The boat. They're going to crank them out as fast as they can. And so I think that's this, what I like to call the intersection of safety and commerce.
Yes.
And that's a difficult intersection where safety often gets thrown under the bus.
When it's
bucking that, I'm bucking that trend.
To add to that, it doesn't help that there's a lot of people that are trying to be, I don't know what, social media famous or something like that, and they end up promoting very dangerous stuff. Like there was a video one time, the guy was promoting, wearing waders, and he jumped off the dock and got back in, and he's like, I'm fine, and he's promoting it all over, even in our area. And I think this guy was like Tennessee or something, still cold water, but totally different situation. And like, it didn't matter how many times people were trying to explain to him in a very humble way that this is very dangerous. He just kept wanting to push it, So I like to think this, with great power comes great responsibility. At the end of the day, I would not be here if I didn't take safety serious and I didn't, try to educate as many as I can, because I know what kayak kayaking and kayak fishing has done for me. You know, it's saved my life. It's brought me a lot of happiness, a lot of passion, a lot of friends and relationships, and it's just been incredible for me. And I want everybody else to be able to experience that, but I want them to do it safely, so that they can make it back and, you know, continue to do what they love.
Yeah, agreed. And there was a Paddle Sports Trade Coalition, kind of a newly formed organization that's really trying to build, you know, participation and awareness in paddle sports. And at the PTC Collab, which is an AGM event in Oklahoma City in September, Emily Jackson, you know, had a really good comment in a roundtable discussion. You know, paddle sports, you know, allows an outlet for people to, you know, relax and, you know, express themselves. And, you know, if they're dealing with issues in their regular day-to-day life, paddle sports, really being on the water, tends to really alleviate some of those stresses. And, you know, like you said, you know, Chuck, it, you know, can save your life, you know, being on the water and enjoying that slower pace of life and being able to control and define where you want to be at any point in time, which I think is very unique to paddle sports.
Absolutely. We do have a couple of questions.
Yeah, I was just going to say to Stig, I'd be real happy to look into that Paddle Sports Trade Coalition with you. And offer some advice, because the history of trade associations in paddle sports and safety is not the best. I think when it got underway, you know, they rolled out this challenging conditions myth, and they were not supportive of cold water safety at all. In fact, there was a tremendous amount of pushback from the industry. I remember it well. It's well documented. So we can always go forth and do better. And I think if you've got a new group in the trade, I'd really be interested in getting together and talking.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, in the past, I belong to many trade associations. I'm actually on the board of the Paddle Sports Trade Coalition, and it's what's unique about this one is that it's a combination of not just it's a combination of all people who have a vested interest in ensuring paddle sports is safe and it grows and is sustainable. So it's, you know, it's brands, it's retailers, it's outfitters, it's sales reps, it's media associates, it's clubs, schools. So it's the whole gamut to really make sure that we are putting forward a sport that is, you know, it checks all the boxes to everybody.
Well, the National Center for Cold Water Safety has a policy that will partner with anybody in the promotion of cold water safety and paddle sport safety. So after this is over, why don't we just kind of put our heads together and you can educate me a little further on what that coalition is doing, because it sounds great to me.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and likewise, you know, if there's any way that I can assist with that, you gentlemen know I'm in.
Awesome, thank you.
We did have a couple of questions real quick to go through. First one real quick. Roy asked, my biggest problem is being a big dude. Finding a dry suit is difficult. And I know it can be very difficult to find just the general sizes to fit, but I know some companies will make, you know, custom size suits.
Yeah, we do alterations and custom suits. I would say dry suit is probably the one garment that is so difficult to make, because you're dealing with every type of body shape, and you've got one zipper size a zipper to get into them with, and you've got, women's are actually even more difficult to do. So we're working on a full women's revamp of our dry suit line, trying to accommodate the different shapes of women, but it's a very difficult item to get to fit everyone perfectly. You've got someone who's 6'3", 180 pounds, who needs to get extra large for height, but the width of the chest and the hips and the seat are way too big. You've got someone who's 5'6" and 200 pounds. You know, the medium is the right height, but they need the extra large for the other dimensions. So you're always kind of, it's a very difficult thing to do in dry suits, to get it to fit perfectly.
The nice thing is, it doesn't really have to fit that perfect though, right? You know, if it's a little big on you, your underlayers, that's going to keep you warm as long as it's not super tight and super compressing, and your gaskets are sealed.
For
you know,
sure.
you can get away with something a little bit bigger.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it's better to be. I tend to. I'm 6'3", 190, 200 pounds, and I should be in our extra large. I actually prefer the large for the type of paddling that I do because I'd rather a little less bulk. But the extra large, same thing. Once you're in a boat, all that extra bulk tends to disappear.
Right. And you know, that's perfect. It brings us into our next question from Jen. She asked, do you find these suits specifically impeding on the range of motion at all? Or is mobility still a thing? For me personally, I don't feel any kind of resistance. The only time maybe it feels a little restrictive is, you know, say I'm going offshore on Lake Erie and it's 20 degrees outside and 10-mile-an-hour wind. I mean, it's going to be cold out there. So having extra bulk in the underlayers can occasionally, I think, get maybe a little bit restrictive, but nothing like, say, you know, a float suit or a wetsuit or something like that. But what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, the benefits of a dry suit especially being waterproof and breathable, you can put in a thinner layer of fleece underneath it, and you will be way warmer than a 5 or 6 mil neoprene wetsuit. If you ever tried paddling in a 5 or 6 mil neoprene wetsuit, it's a horrible experience. It's just you're restrictive, and there's a lot of bulk underneath your arms. I think the biggest thing, you just want to make sure that your range of motion is there when you're paddling. So the sleeve length, and you cross your arms in front of your chest, make sure there's no restriction across there. And otherwise, after that, they're really, really compatible with the paddling style. People have a bit of a misnomer because back in the day, back 15 years ago, a lot of the waterproof zippers, were brass coil zippers, and they're very difficult to do on and off, and they were very stiff when they were done up. So you had this, a kind of metal. If it was a front entry, you'd have a metal kind of bar across your chest. If it was a shoulder entry, you'd have this really stiff material and zipper crossing your shoulders and down by your triceps. Since then, I would say almost all the high-end brands have gone to a plastic zipper. YKK makes one, and T-Zip out of Germany make them. Those are kind of the two top brands. And they create a perfect watertight seal, but they're still extremely flexible. So that zipper disappears into the fabric, if you will. So I would say if you paddle in a dry suit from days gone by, or one that you use at a rental facility that could be quite old, and it had a metal or brass coil zipper, what's out there now, the tech that's out there now is 10 times more comfortable. And also the fabrics have improved too. As lamination techniques have improved. We figured out how to get the membranes, to be extremely waterproof and breathable without being as bulky and crisp. You'll find that the fabric flows a lot better around your body.
Yeah, being old school, I think Stig and I probably remember really well what it's like to paddle in a thick wetsuit. Back in the day, before dry suits came along, I was paddling in the Chesapeake Bay region and other areas where the water gets really cold in the winter. My wetsuit was a 7 mil Farmer John covered with a 7 mil long sleeve shorty. So on my core, I had 14 millimeters of neoprene. That's
a lot.
That's a workout.
Yeah.
That's a workout. But that's what we needed in order to paddle on 35-degree water in the Chesapeake Bay. And we did some crossings there that were 16 miles long. And you're out in the middle of the bay. There's no VHF radio, no cell phones back in the day. And boy, you really, you had to be self-sufficient. But I'll tell you, as soon as the decent dry suits came along, we were like, yeah, this really works.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's so much more comfortable and so much, and I think what Stig said about just making sure that you've got enough arm length in there so that it doesn't bind. But if you do that, and when I go to these outdoor stores that carry your line, they're real careful about those measurements. They all know that. And so they're going to help you get a suit that fits well. And it's, those things, it's a game changer, really, the dry suit, because you can get out of the water and you walk around. There's no, it just does not have the difficulty that you encounter. I mean, you can wear a wetsuit at near freezing temperatures, but it's got to be thick, and it's not going to be as flexible or comfortable as a dry suit, where you can add or subtract layers depending on the water temperature.
Exactly. With the wetsuits, you have to have those multiple thicknesses to either, downside or layer up. Because I think just what the 8 mil suits, they're rated for what, 60 degrees, isn't it?
Well, I think it's, the rating things are difficult because, they also depend on what your body type is. Somebody that's a larger frame, that's got some body fat, they don't have the same cooling ratio that someone like me has. I'm 155, 160 pounds and 5'10", and I'll cool a lot faster than someone like that. So, but this is another reason why on our website we recommend swim testing and field testing your gear. So everything about cold water safety that you'd ever want to know is going to be right there. And there you are, Chuck.
Oh yeah,
our poster child. What a good look with your beard all frozen. But
that's a perfect example of it buys you time because go ahead.
That's why we featured you on our gear selection page on the National Center for Cold Water Safety website, because I just thought it was a great image. Number one, but also just all the work that you're doing to help promote cold water safety in the fishing community, I think was
oh yeah.
But there's a lot of information on that site. It's not something you can digest in a day. But any question that you have, and also we've got 23 close calls and fatalities that are described and analyzed with lessons learned, and we look at the factors that contributed, the major contributing factors to the accident. So you get if you read some of those accident reports, you'll get a real clear idea of why we have the golden rules of cold water safety, why we say what we say about gear. And this is a site that is based entirely on the science of thermoregulatory physiology, and also supplemented with real life incidents where people have gotten into trouble or not gotten into trouble simply because they were wearing the proper gear or they weren't wearing the proper gear. So I would encourage it's simple to get there. It's coldwatersafety.org, and it's a free site. It's non-commercial. You don't have to sign up or give us your email address or anything like that. It's just completely free. You go there, and we also have all of our videos on Vimeo because we don't want to put them on YouTube where they're going to serve you up ads that are distracting. So that's just a little plug. Little plug for the website for the National Center for Cold Water Safety.
It's a top-notch resource for the water sports industry. Paddling, boating, you name it. When I went over to Portugal, Team Romania came up to me, and we got into cold water, and they mentioned your website. And I remember making that video because I'm like, dude, you're not only saving us, you're saving people all over the world and educating them. Because, back when I got started, I didn't find your website at first. I was digging to China basically to find the knowledge that I needed. And then, either testing it, verifying it, or debunking it in real-time situations. And eventually that's what led us together.
Yeah, I'm really glad you found us, because we've been online for 12 years now, and before we set up the website, there wasn't a good source for cold water safety on the web. There's a lot of misinformation and a lot of people bloviating about cold water safety, who really didn't know what they were talking about, and they're perpetuating myths and so forth. And so thanks to people like you, Chuck, and others who have helped to promote the website, we're an international resource now. And I look at the stats, and we've got people all over the world who go there for information, and
Yeah,
that's
and you know,
more than enough reward for me, because it's, I know you take a heck of a lot of time with your dry suit, Stig, and when I redid the website 2 years ago, it took me a full year to completely redesign it, get in new platform, new videos, new information, the way it was organized. And so I'm happy that it's there as a resource, and I'm happy when people use it. I'm glad, Chuck, that you have helped so much getting that information out to people in the fishing community.
The best part about it for me, when I first started talking about this stuff, I was kind of the only one of the few people that actually was talking about it. And, today, every time I turn around, somebody's sharing the knowledge and spreading the awareness, and it's like, yeah, I've done my part, you've done your part. But at the end of the day, it's a community, as a village, we make these things happen.
Yeah, I think, and back in the day, when I was in my 20s, I had my most influential mentor was a woman by the name of Louise Chatfield, and she was talking about education, and her term for it, the phrase she used was, it's the gift of knowledge. And that's always stuck with me, and that's how I feel about it. And that's what I feel like the three of us are doing. We're sharing information, but we're sharing it as a gift to the public and our fellow paddlers.
1,000%. We did have a couple more questions here. Matt Dillon asks, what's the survival time? Let's say you don't have a dry suit in 48-degree water.
Well, that's a good question. The first thing is, if you go to our website, you'll find out that we don't give precise survival times, because you can't do that. What
Everybody's different.
And what we can say is that for most people, if you're not wearing a wetsuit or dry suit and you fall into cold water, and we define what cold water is on our website, but if you fall into cold water, particularly if the water temperature is below 60, your first problem is going to be cold shock. And the chance that you'll gasp while your head's underwater immediately upon capsizing, that's pretty large. And then cold shock is you've completely lost control of your breathing. So in that initial period of time, which can be quite long, just depends on how you respond, but you're in a fight for survival and your greatest threat is drowning. So this is long before hypothermia becomes an issue. So I would say you've got two issues in survival. You've got that initial phase where your breathing is totally out of control. Then you've got physical incapacitation, which is you're in the water long enough, and depending on your body size and whatever, you're going to lose the use of your hands and feet, and then your arms and legs. So eventually you're just going to be sitting there floating in the water, helpless, in your life jacket. If you don't have a life jacket, you're done. You will have drowned long before you get to that point. And finally, after about 20 or 30 minutes, depending again on your body size, how much subcutaneous fat you've got, then you start getting in a situation where your body temperature is going to go down and you're dealing with hypothermia. But what a dry suit does, for example, is it completely eliminates cold shock. And it delays incapacitation. And this is again back to what Stig was saying. It buys you time. So that's the thing. But if you don't have thermal protection, you capsize in 48-degree Fahrenheit water, you may survive it, But
Right.
like I say, it's going to go down in your history, your mental history, as one of the worst and most terrifying experiences you've ever had in your life. And for a lot of people, that's kayak for sale on Craigslist,
Mhm.
because they are done. They don't want to. They don't want to go near that again, and it's not necessary. But if you're unprepared, that's what you set yourself up for in the event that you capsize.
Mhm.
So
Right.
I just think, this people think about water temperature the same way they think about air temperature, because they've got a lot of experience with air temperature, almost no experience with water temperature. So they say, well, 50-degree Fahrenheit. I mean, that's not too bad. Yeah, it is if you're in the water, because water is really different. It's a whole different animal from air temperature, and you need protection, because falling into that kind of water, it's a life-threatening event, and people need to be clear on that.
Right. Well, we're at about 7:48. I know Stig has to run at 8 p.m. So I just wanted to give you a chance. I have one of your um, level 6 Emperor suits here.
Mhm.
It's actually a buddy of mine, Mike Hills. He let me borrow it for the show. So I just wanted to kind of give you a chance to go through some of the features of what makes a good dry suit and what differentiates it from, like some of the generic knockoff things.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to the components and how it's assembled are the biggest parts. To sew a dry suit using, 150 grams per meter squared, cotton would be the same amount of effort as it would be to sew it in that 220 grams per meter squared waterproof breathable fabric. It really comes down to making sure that all those pieces that go into that garment, or in this case the dry suit, is the best that you can possibly source at this point in time. Now that's one exciting thing, I guess, when you're creating really technical garments, is the ability that's kind of the bleeding edge of, if we call it garment design or components, always tends to go into the things that require it the most. So for example, the Emperor, which is our top tier dry suit, we use latex gaskets that are made in the UK. They also make latex for the medical industry, so the quality and the consistency is always spot on. The ones we choose, we get them custom heat dipped, so you can actually seam tape on the latex, versus having to just glue them, and then you're worried about the glue potentially failing over time. That zipper that you're showing there, that is a YKK waterproof zipper. T-Zip out of Germany makes one very similar. We ended up going to YKK from T-Zip because I found that their slider is a molded slider, which tends to stay on the teeth a lot longer. So people who are a bit bigger, if they pull that zipper on a 45-degree angle with a lot of force, you can actually pop that slider off on a T-Zip. On a YKK, we've found that doesn't happen. Slightly more expensive, but it's just worth it. The last thing you want is someone out using the suit, trying to get it on or off in the middle of a trip, and then they pop the zipper off, or the slider off the zipper. It's not easy to get back on. Moving down to, you saw the socks down there. We have, I would say, all really good high-end dry suits have a waterproof breathable sock. There are latex socks out there, or there's just ankle gaskets. Once you start doing that, you're kind of sacrificing that durability and that chance of something going wrong when you don't want it to go wrong. On the Emperor, we do Cordura shoulders, seat, and knees. What's nice about that is just the high wear areas. This is our top tier expedition dry suit. So then it just allows for a lot more abrasion resistance and durability. You'll see the way we pattern, the patterning is also quite unique. The back seat is actually about 6 inches longer than the front. So it's really geared towards that sitting position. So, a person had commented about how do you get how does it fit when you're wearing it? These are little tricks you can do in the garment industry where you can change the paneling and the patterning so that it's kind of pre-shaped the way that you'd be using it most. So that was definitely it's been one of the ones being in production the longest. And on top of that, all the seam tape, we use the same seam tape factory that Gore uses out of Japan. We use Queenslight machines, which are a heated top roller, so you're getting that perfect bond every time. We use a wider seam tape than standard as well. So we use a 28 millimeter seam tape, which is more expensive. But what's nice about that is you're getting more coverage outside of that stitch line. So longer lasting, more durable, more waterproof, or more waterproof longer.
And these ladder stitching, if I remember correctly, that's to help with, like you were saying, just be comfortable in the sitting position.
Yes, that's a articulated spine, if you will. That's what we kind of named it internally. So the suit is actually pre-articulated for the seating position.
I don't think people generally appreciate just how technically difficult it is to make a garment that's watertight. These aren't waterproof. I mean, they are waterproof, but they're not like a rain jacket, which is waterproof, but it's not watertight. These have to be watertight, no water getting in. And if you've got a seam where you've joined two pieces of material, you have to tape it.
Yes.
Because if you don't tape it, the water is just going to go right through the seam. And so I appreciate that wider tape because, more expensive, but it gives you that margin of safety. And that's what you want to see in a piece of garment, in any garment that you're relying on for your survival.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why there's very few, good dry suit manufacturers, left, even because it's a very, very hard thing to make consistently, and to make it at a price that people will still be able to buy it.
Yeah.
The factory that we use. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, RJ was asking, what did he say? He said, that nice suit, how much do they cost? The Emperor I was showing you, that one is $12.95. They do have some that are a little bit more expensive. They have some that are a little bit less. It really depends on what you're looking for at the time and what your budget is. When I first started, I didn't really have a whole big budget, but I knew I needed a dry suit because, like I said, kayak fishing's saved my life. If I can't get out on the water, it's torture. So that's why I went with just a base. This is actually like a semi-dry suit style. This one's made by Cocatat, but same level of quality and care and everything like that. But you just want to, if all you can afford is one of their their base model suits, hey, it's going to do the job for you. Just get out there and test it in the water.
One thing that people say, is they'll go, well, how can you expect somebody that paid $250 for a big box kayak to spend $1,200 on a dry suit? And my point is, if you were in the cold water without it, and I came paddling by, I could sell you, a dry suit for about 10 grand, no problem. And the issue really is, if you're just paddling a $250 kayak and you can't afford thermal protection, well, you better stay off the water when it's cold.
The real question is,
you can't have both and be safe and not avoid a life-threatening situation. If you just can't go out there in a cheap kayak with no thermal protection and pretend that your life isn't going to be in danger if you capsize.
Yep. So Roy said it right there. That's what I tell everybody. What is your life worth? And at the end of the day, my first dry suit, it's got to be 8 or 9 years old. I've abused the crap out of it. I've even stuck a fishing hook through it the third trip out. And thank God for AquaSeal, I patched it up real quick. But, 800,000, 1,500 divided up over 10 years. It really is not much to stay out there and be safe,
That's what your life's worth. Yeah.
I think also something smart there too, Chuck. It also extends your season, right? Us, on the East Coast of North America, it gets you an extra month or two on either side of the spring summer season. So there's also value in that too. Allows you to be on the water for a longer portion of the year, regardless if the water temperature is freezing or not.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we've got people paddling off the coast of the Gulf of Maine, and they're paddling year round. And they're in dry suits with all the protective gear, and they've got the hand protection and the head protection, that sort of thing. But so yeah, it can extend your season definitely, but it can also let you paddle year round if you take the proper safety precautions and you understand your gear and you practice your rescues and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. And even people that frequent like Lake Superior, Lake Superior is always cold. You never want to go on that lake without a dry suit. One thing that I did want to kind of differentiate for everybody is the difference between like your front zippers and the shoulder zippers on the back. And also just, reiterate the fact of like what makes a dry suit versus a semi-dry suit.
Yeah, I mean, I had a call from somebody, the exact same question about front entry versus rear entry dry suits. Really back in the day when it was metal coil zippers, really everyone wanted the rear entry because you didn't want that hard metal zipper across your chest that your PFD was kind of digging into your body. With the advent of plastic zippers that are way more flexible, you're really now deciding between, in my mind, it's kind of ease of entry. So having the front entry zipper, you can get it on and off by yourself. There's a bit of, some people shy away from those because when you have a double tunnel for kayaking, it's difficult to get that zipper to cross through that double tunnel and still have that height you need for your spray skirt to fit into. We pioneer a technique for ours. We really tilt ours on an angle so it goes over your shoulder, so you get the full 12-inch double tunnel you need, but it's still a front zip. See a lot of the expedition people using the rear zip. It's a little bit less in other ways, a little less restriction on with the zipper going over your shoulder or not. So those are kind of the two choices. I mean, me personally, as I've gotten older, my shoulders are way less flexible. I go front entry all the time. It's easy. When I was younger, I for sure used the rear entry. It was kind of what I did. As far as dry suits, semi-dry versus a full dry, it really comes down to the latex cuffs. Some people are allergic to latex. So if you are allergic to latex and you still want a dry suit, I implore you to check out our Loki dry suit. It's the world's first latex-free dry suit that we invented and launched 2 years ago at a trade show in Europe. We use a very unique system that we designed for the fire ice rescue departments up here in Canada, and we put that into our recreational line. But really, a semi-dry, most likely it's going to have a punch-through neck, neoprene neck, no latex. So water will come in. It's going to be a small amount. Sometimes they don't have latex wrists either. And sometimes they don't have like full water breathable socks, and they have just a latex ankle gasket as well. I mean, great. It's still better than nothing, right? It's if you're that with a pair of neoprene booties, a neoprene gloves over top. If you do fall in, you bought yourself still time. You're buying time with these things. And then if you want, a full latex dry suit with wrists, neck, and water breathable shoes, you just bought yourself even more time.
Yep. And this is the semi-dry suit here. Like Stig said, the biggest thing with your neoprene neck gaskets, they might not be as tight, or you might forget to cinch them down. So, occasionally you will take a couple tablespoons back down, the back of your neck, which it'll wake you up. And if you're not wearing a life jacket to keep your head above the water, I can definitely see more water getting in there on occasion, especially if you don't cinch that down. Now, the flip side is with your full dry suits with the latex neck gaskets, sometimes those can be a bit restrictive and uncomfortable. So you want to make sure that it's going to be comfortable enough for you to wear, and not something that it's just going to sit in the closet and you're going to choose to go out unsafely because you can't stand having that. And actually, that's a great point. Do you have any recommendations as far as stretching the neck gasket or modifying it to fit properly?
Yeah, most of like the reputable companies get gaskets from the UK, and they have on the inside they've got these little trim lines. I always tell people to put it on first at home, kind of suffer through it if you can for an hour or two, because your natural body heat will soften that gasket, let it stretch out. If after that it's just unbearable, you can turn it inside out and trim down like one cut line at a time. I never recommend more than one at a time, because inadvertently people always trim down 2 or 3, and then the gasket's too loose, and then it's not doing its job. The other thing you can do is you can stretch it over a large traffic cone, or back in the day, those big ketchup things you used to get at high school in the cafeteria, the large ketchup cans, and then you can kind of stretch it out overnight. That gets the latex to relax. But if you put it on, you find that it's slightly uncomfortable, and it's not unbearable, I always suggest just wear it, and within a week it's gonna mold to your neck. And it's a way better fit than trimming it down too much or overstretching it.
Absolutely.
That's too, is like the gaskets are replaceable. It's most dive shops, most paddling stores, most brands will take those back, and they can replace those for you. And it's a pretty simple thing. We actually have a YouTube video on our site showing how to do it by yourself. We use the same molds we do at our assembly and factory. So when we replace them, it looks like it's factory perfect. But it doesn't have to be. You can do it by yourself with the techniques we show you on our website, and that gets you going again. And I think on that same topic, gasket maintenance, sunscreen and bug repellent, it liquefies latex. It's the number one thing we see. People who have put sunscreen or bug repellent deep in them, that latex just turns into goop, and then the gasket's useless.
Yeah, and even on the flip side of that, if you don't ever put anything on it, and what you would put on it is like 303 protectant, right? The aerospace rubber stuff.
Right. Yeah.
When I first got my dry suit, I like to push things to the limit, so I didn't treat my my wrist gaskets. I did treat my zipper though, because getting a zipper replaced on a dry suit is a very expensive thing. So I'd always use zipper lubes, but I never did do my wrist gaskets. And probably about 6 years in, they started to dry out, and you'll start to split, and then eventually at one point your wrist gasket will just split open, and then it's not doing its job. But like you said, I mean, it's actually a fairly easy repair to put some new wrist gaskets on, but it can be prevented with the 303 protectant, like once or twice a year.
That's right. Yeah. You kind of recommend it before you put it in storage in the fall, and then once or twice throughout the year.
Nice. We did have RJ Bass Fishing asked if there was any retailers in Ohio that carried level 6 dry suits. Maybe. Yes,
we do. I think our website has the list of all of them, and we're going to be at Canoecopia in Madison, Wisconsin in March as well. We have a big booth there, so for sure, if you're around that area, come on by and check it out. It's an incredible show. It's a lot of the brand owners are there. You get to talk to them and voice your opinions or try on the different products and the suits and get real feedback.
Awesome. And I just found it on the website. If you scroll down on the Level 6 website, all the way down on the bottom, they have the dealer locator here. And it looks like closest one to me is going to be Backpacker's Shop, which is right down the street.
I've had some situations where over the years where a neck gasket, not mine, but some other paddler owner thing, just split, and you've got that much, and it's just, what are you going to do? Gorilla tape the damn thing, and just, it's enough to get you back to the takeout, and then you can go ahead and have it fixed. But it's not like, there's nothing you can do if the latex does split. Hey, Gorilla tape the sucker.
For sure.
Keep on paddling.
Yeah.
And that's a great point. If you're considering a used dry suit, you want to think about these things. How did they care for it?
Oh,
Did they keep that zipper clean? Because if they rolled around on the beach and covered it with sand and then, you know, zipped up their dry suit, it probably leaks. And you save a little bit of money and then you end up rebuilding the suit and you're in more expensive than a brand new suit. So just be cautious about that. I know there are some military suits around too. Most of them have the big heavy metal zippers.
Mhm.
And most of them need a lot of work as well. So, you know,
I
save
think
up your money.
I think you can do the same thing with the footies. You know, you get a pinhole or something in the footy, you know, you can slap some Gorilla Tape on that. And, you know, it works. It works pretty well. I mean, eventually you're gonna want to get new footies put on, but if it's just like a couple of pinhole leaks, you can attach those with Gorilla Tape and
You'll have Aqua Seal too.
Yeah, that's what I usually carry is
Mhm.
the AquaSeal UV.
Mm-hmm.
That way you could just put it right on there. You know, if you want it to look neat, you could put a piece of like painter's tape or anything over the outside and put the AquaSeal on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, unless you look for it, you're not going to know that's there. Or if you're in the field, you know, and you have an emergency, you just take that AquaSeal, you put it on there, and with that UV version, it's going to cure instantly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you'll be able to fix it on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, agreed.
That's awesome. I did want to get into, like, we kind of skipped over debunking the cold water safety stuff. So I did kind of want to get into that. I know, Stig, you're kind of running out of time here.
Mm-hmm.
If you needed to go, that's fine. If you wanted to stay around for another 5.
Yeah, I'm good for 5 more minutes.
Cool.
I just say about the cold water myths. There are 8 of them, roughly, and the top 8, we've gone, and what we do is we explain the myth and what it says, and then we explain why nobody should follow it. And generally speaking, it's because they're nonsense, and they have absolutely no scientific basis. So they're just wrong, and you should not rely on them for your safety. A lot of these things will say, oh, you know, you don't need thermal protection because blah blah blah, or if the air plus the water temperature is above, depends on the myth, 100, 110, 120, if you add the 2 numbers, air and water together, then you don't need it. And these are just you know, they're just wrong. They don't have any scientific basis, and they're, you know, they're the same kind of myths that we used to hear about back in the day in mountaineering or backpacking, where you're supposed to rub snow on frostbite. Now, we managed to dig a deep hole. Survival estimates, that's another one. These survival charts are wildly inaccurate, and my main objection to them is they give people a false sense of security and they understate the danger. So you look at one of these things and you go, well, why do I need a dry suit? You know, I can survive for an hour. Well, no, you can't. And those are based, you know, these survival estimates, they're based on mathematical calculations that involve your body temperature cooling to, let's say, 85 degrees, where your heart becomes unstable and you're going to have a heart attack and die. You're dead long before you ever reach that point if you don't have thermal protection. So
absolutely,
that's what we're talking about. I mean, I think it's important to approach cold water in a realistic way. It's extraordinarily dangerous if you're not prepared for immersion. And the only way you're going to be prepared for immersion is if you've got thermal protection. That's a wetsuit or a dry suit. And otherwise, you're in for an extraordinarily nasty surprise. And as I say, it's cold shock. And just talking about the cold shock part, I talk to a lot of survivors when I do these, when I'm writing up these incident reports. And these are people who have been really terrified by the experience. They talk about having nightmares for months afterwards, and they can't control them. And if they get near their kayak, they start to have a really nasty feeling. This is normal. And it's just the body's way of reacting to a situation that your brain deep down inside looks at and says, oh my God, I almost died. And your brain is really good at embedding that information and serving it up to you as a fear emotion whenever you get near that situation again, because that's what the mental survival process is all about. And so you don't want that to happen to you. It is just, man, just a nasty experience you never want to have. You're out there to have fun. You're going to go kayaking. Yeah, it's wonderful. It's a wonderful thing to get out on the water. But boy, you do not want to have a cold water survival situation thrust upon you when you least expect it. Oh, you're just reaching for that fish like you do in the video, Chuck,
Right.
And all of a sudden you're a little bit off balance in what is normally a very stable fishing kayak. You can stand up in the damn thing, but you get a little bit off, and then all of a sudden it's over. And like you say, then the only thing that matters is, are you dressed for the swim?
Right.
So
we've had a few people on the Lake Erie Kayak Anglers podcast that had went through those situations, like Michael Paletta and Robert Sharkey, who had commented earlier. These are people that they maybe didn't understand the dangers, and life taught them that lesson. Fortunately, they made it through, and they're the biggest proponents because they lived it. They lived that moment where you're pretty much saying goodbye. And
it's terrifying. Absolutely terrifying.
I think there's two main reasons for it. Number one, people put too much credit on stability. First of all, stability is not purchased, it's earned. You can have the most stable kayak, but if you've never got intimate with it with re-entry practice, you're going to find yourself in a situation where you make that mistake and you do enter the water. And if it's a dangerous situation where you're in water that's below 60 degrees or even 60 to 70 for too long and you can't get out of it, that's basically going to take your life, and that leads me to like the 120 rule I see most commonly being pushed around. If the water temperature plus the air temperature equals 120 degrees, you don't need thermal protection. But let me paint a scenario. So the water temperature is 40 degrees and the air temperature is 80 degrees. You fall out of your kayak or you fall out of your boat or your boat sinks and you cannot get out of that 40-degree water. That 120 rule is not going to save your life. You're still going to perish very quickly.
It's just very, very misleading because, the air temperature is not what you're guarding against. I mean, just about anybody can dress to go on a hike in a local park or on a local trail. That's one thing, layers and this, that, and the other. But you fall into 40-degree Fahrenheit water, first of all, your breathing is totally out of control instantly. Huge, entire, big gas, full lung inflation, out of control. You're going to start hyperventilating. You can't control any of it.
And the most important thing about that involuntary gasp reflex, if you're not wearing your life jacket like many boaters, and you make that mistake, when you involuntarily gasp, if you're under the water, you could just fill your lungs with water.
Yeah.
And they used to call that what's that? Oh yeah, straight to the bottom.
You're going straight to the bottom. And I'll tell you, if you ever look at these news reports and you see that the dive team is on scene, that means no PFD. They weren't wearing a PFD. They're looking for them on the bottom. They'll find them at some point, maybe. But yeah, it's an extraordinarily difficult experience. And the other thing about the cold shock is that if you can't control your breathing, that causes swimming failure very, very quickly. And so there are plenty of studies that show that people who are within 6 to 10 feet of safety, something they could hold on to, they're not wearing their PFD, they're not wearing a wetsuit or dry suit, they can't swim just that short distance in order to save their own lives without drowning. And so that gives you and these are people who could swim. So,
Right.
people blow off the PFD, they say, well, I can swim. Yeah, but can you swim in cold water? Have you experienced that? Have you tried it? You know, what's your direct personal experience with it? And if most of them don't have it, are you an open water swimmer, or are you just used to swimming in a pool and you were doing that 20 years ago, or little duck pond near your house with the warm water? You were doing that 20 years ago. Now it's cold open water, you've got waves
And current.
and you're just not going to make it. You're just not going to make it.
We had
the second you can no longer tread water, you're going down.
Right. We had a situation a handful of months back. It was probably late summer, early fall. Gentleman went out, I think off of Edgewater out by Cleveland, and fell out of his kayak, didn't have a life jacket. Continued to try to swim to shore. There's actually video of this from the live cameras out there where he's trying to swim to shore and the current is ripping him back out. And this guy treaded water he came across a 5-gallon bucket floating around just in the middle of nowhere, clinging to that bucket for dear life, I think for 11 hours overnight, until a fisherman found him about 4 miles offshore out by the Cleveland crib. And the best thing about that story is this guy survived, because that situation most would not. Would be another statistic.
Yeah, he's extraordinarily fortunate.
And even somebody like this, I mean, I don't know the guy personally, but I've heard he tried to swim to shore multiple times, so he was probably in pretty good physical shape.
Yeah.
But he just couldn't get past that current that just kept ripping him back out. So, it doesn't work like that story I was watching last night, the kayak tragedy out by you. This guy was trying to swim, I think to a buoy, and the current was pushing against him twice as fast as a human could swim.
Oh yeah. It's there's a whole lot that can go wrong in these situations, and really, for a lot of kayakers who are prepared, things go wrong all the time, but it never makes the news because they're prepared. They handle the situation themselves in the group, and then they're back on their way. It's not a noteworthy occasion. It doesn't become a survival situation because they've got the right gear and they practiced re-entering their kayaks. They practiced solo and assisted rescues and things like that. So it's a completely different situation from someone who was not expecting it, doesn't know anything about cold water safety, and all of a sudden they're in this situation. They can't breathe. They're absolutely terrified, and I can't stress that enough. It's short of getting struck by lightning or hit by a bus, there aren't too many things physiologically speaking that are more intense and more of a shock to your body than sudden immersion in cold water. That's really a trip. When I was younger, I used to go out and we'd practice, in cold water, and we'd go in, without our gear and just experiment and this, that, and the other. I don't do that now. I'm 76, and that kind of sudden immersion puts a spike on your blood pressure and an increased workload on your heart that, personally, I'm not interested in going through that. I think it's that dangerous. So I think what Stig said about the dry suits and it's survival gear, and it's so important to be properly prepared for it. Otherwise, I would say, don't go out when the water is below 70 degrees unless you've got some kind of protection. Just don't do it. It's not worth it.
Yeah,
You might get away with it, but if you don't, think about your friends, think about your family, think about the people that you're going to leave behind, and they're going to go, well, I just don't understand. He was an experienced kayaker. Yeah, he was an experienced. They're all experienced, the ones that die. The news reports, they're all experienced. But that's not really a question. The question is, were they safety conscious?
Right.
And a lot of people are not safety conscious, not because they don't care, not because they have a death wish. It's just because they're uninformed. They never ran across that information. And that was true of every single one of us before we learned to do better.
1,000%. We were all,
you're not born with
ignorant to the knowledge and the facts, and it's not because anybody's stupid or trying to be unsafe. We just don't know any better. And a lot of times we don't realize what the true impact of our mistakes are on the people that care, right? If you do something stupid and you don't get the proper gear because it's $1,000 and you go out there and you risk your life, well, you don't make it back. I guarantee you'd pay $10,000 to change that for, not just for you, but for your children or your loved ones or just your friends. So, it's just something to consider. If it's dangerous and you don't have the right gear, there's no shame in just not going until next year. Start putting a couple dollars away, go hit a bank, fish from shore, or just prepare for it. There's no shame in being safe and making it back to your loved ones.
Well, I read hundreds of these reports every year, close calls and fatalities, and I think the one thing that you can say about every single one of them is that the people never thought that on their last paddle that they were going to die. That was the farthest thing from their mind. If they thought they were, they're not going to go out. Even the people who are expert kayakers, they're doing risk management all the time. They're thinking about it. And you very seldom hear about them needing to be rescued or them getting into trouble. Every once in a while you do. The outcome's usually good because they had VHF radios, they had the proper gear, they had practice rescues and things like that. But most of these people, they had no idea. And I think that's what you and I certainly are trying to do in educating people in the communities to say, well, look, you may not realize it, but this is a life-threatening situation if you capsize without the proper gear.
Right.
And you don't want to do that. So either get the proper gear or stay home during that particular season, or don't paddle in those waters. You mentioned Lake Superior, Apostle Islands, Pictured Rocks, National Lakeshore is real popular on Lake Michigan. The water is dangerously cold year round, and there have been some real horror stories in terms of rescues and near misses right along that particular section of coast. And it's very unforgiving. Oh, it's beautiful. If the water's just flat, nothing happens. But if the wind comes up, it's a whole different ball game. And those waves can come in, they reflect off the cliffs, and the water starts doing this. And next thing you know, you're over, and then your kayak blows away, and then you're trying to you don't have cell service because there's no cell service there. And it's just one thing after another. And that's not why we go kayaking, to get into situations like that. We go kayaking to have fun.
Exactly. And just think about what's the worst case scenario that could happen in your situation and prepare for that.
Yeah, that's our fifth golden rule of cold water safety. Think about the worst that can happen and prepare for it. So those 5 golden rules, they're all on our website. They're explained in great detail. And what we do is we tie close calls and fatalities, those incident reports, we tie those to each of the golden rules. So like you look at golden rule number 1, there are going to be a certain number of incidents there that we describe that would have been different. And here you are with the cold water, the gear guide section on our website is very robust. I mean, we go into tremendous detail about what type of gear, why you need it, what it looks like, how you can test it, all of those things. So it's really
And
you will have
you,
it's a master class. It's a master class in cold water safety.
it really is a great resource. Definitely head over to coldwatersafety.org and check out all the awesome resources. Or you can always reach out to myself or Moulton Avery or even Stig Larssen. He had to step out. He had a meeting at 8:30, so he quietly exited. But definitely a pleasure having both of you guys on the show. And before we wrap up, we do have one more question. Bill was asking, how dangerous are brief polar plunges, even with medics nearby, specifically for older folks, even in shape? And for me personally, and I'll let you kind of follow up on this, I think really it comes down to building those skills slowly. You know, you're not really just going to go jump off a pier into frozen or half frozen water, because that's going to be extremely dangerous for you. Now, running off of a beach, you have a little bit more control. But when you work yourself into it, you get used to the effects. So now you don't have that massive increase in blood pressure, because your body's kind of used to it. It's not going to react the same way.
Sure.
You know, and there's stories of some of these kids jumping off some of these piers and just
they
not
disappear.
back up.
Yeah, they just go straight down, and it's called sudden disappearance. And it's pretty common. But we have a section on our website that's about acclimation, which is a technical term for getting used to cold water. We explain that whole process. There are people that actually go out. There's an International Ice Swimming Association. They're swimming in ice cold, near freezing water. They're very well prepared, and they've done a lot to get themselves used to it. The other thing about that, though, we have a video on our website that just answers that question. What about polar bear plunges? And I think that the thing about polar bear plunges that you need to understand is, first, most of these people are just running into the water, and they're getting up to their waist. Maybe they're getting a little bit on their chest. They're doing a whole lot of shrieking and squealing, and then they're running straight back out of the water. Their heads never get underwater. So the gasp and water inhalation thing isn't as great, and they're not completely immersed. So that's the way they do it. And most of these people are younger, and they're just running in and then they're running back out, and they've got safety personnel usually on these events. They have safety personnel in rescue dry suits who are kind of forming a outer perimeter of that. And the water never gets to be over your head in terms of depth. The ones I don't like are the ones where they're jumping off of a dock.
Right.
I think those are extraordinarily dangerous, and I don't advise them. But if it's just they're on the beach and it's New Year's, polar bears, or it's running into the water, okay, fine. I don't think there's a huge safety issue there. I mean, if you are, let's say, over the age of 50, maybe not such a good idea. You just go in up to your waist.
Yeah, or maybe
but
have
or something. But don't get your whole torso in, and don't dive in, and don't do that. But in general, I think most of these people are younger, and they're all just out there having a good time. But it's not really technically a cold water immersion situation, because they're not in there completely immersed. So that's what I'd say about polar bear plunges. We do have a video on the site about that.
Yeah, I will. I'll try to find that video and drop the link in the comments, as well as the rest of these other links. I'll put those in the description as well. That way you can easily find the resources that you need to keep you safe, and also contact info for Moulton Avery and Stig Larssen in Level 6 as well. So I appreciate everybody joining us. I think we got through all of the questions. Phil, did we have any more questions?
Negative, sir.
Okay, awesome.
Well, thank you so much, Chuck. I really appreciate this. It's always fun to interact with you, and I deeply appreciate everything that you're doing to promote cold water safety in the fishing community. I think you're saving lives, and I think it's a wonderful thing. It makes me very, very happy, and I always enjoy collaborating with you. And now I think Stig mentioned this Paddle Sports Trade Coalition. He's going to be at Canoecopia. I'm not. We don't do those shows. We can't afford a booth. We don't. That's not how we spend our money, little money we have at the organization. But I can see working with him to help share that message.
Right.
And I think if you have a trade association that's interested in safety, they can make a tremendous contribution. But
Absolutely.
That hasn't traditionally been the position of trade associations. They've been kicking safety to the curb, and they're more interested in selling boats, and they view cold water safety as a threat to sales. I think that's short-sighted, and it seems like he's got a group of people there that feel differently about it, and so I think that's good. I'm looking forward to that. So thanks for the introduction. That was a little.
Oh, absolutely.
Shows you what happens when you get some folks like us together and we get a little chance to talk shop, which doesn't happen very often. So I think it's good. It's really a good thing. I appreciate it.
Well, teamwork makes the dream work. If we didn't all work together towards a similar goal, I think a lot of these things wouldn't exist.
Yeah, that's
true. And I do want to thank you for all your work on the National Center for Cold Water Safety's website. I remember the first time I seen it, compared to what it is now, and you've just done an incredible job with it. It's at the end of the day, it's something that's going to save somebody's life. And the way that I believe, if this saves one life, then it was worth it tenfold. Yeah. So awesome. All right, guys, that's what we have for today. I'm sorry, I have to look at my notes. I forget who's coming on next Thursday, but we will definitely be back here next Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for another episode of the Angler's Wisdom Podcast. See you guys later. Thank you for joining us today on the Angler's Wisdom Podcast. We hope you got some good insight out of the show and learned something new. Don't forget to go over to ampedoutdoors.com and support the title sponsor of the show. Follow them on social media and just show them some love. And lastly, head over to LakeErieKayakFishing.com and check out all the many resources as well as opportunities to book an unforgettable Lake Erie kayak fishing adventure with yours truly. You can also get yourself a Lake Erie kayak fishing gift card, the obsessed angler in your life. And remember, fishing is life, but safety comes first. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next Thursday live on the Angler's Wisdom Podcast.
Oh, yeah! Yeah! Oh! Oh, it's a nice one. Yeah!